Hi there. In this lesson, we're going to talk about getting endorsements for your book. Now, endorsements are just short blurbs. They're usually just a sentence or two long, written by people who support your book. Ideally, these people would be authors or people of authority in a field that's related to your book. Now, endorsements may take a little time and effort to gather, but I promise you they will be worth their weight in gold. I invested the energy into asking for several endorsements for my first published paperback, Birdseed, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It was a game changer as far as my writing career goes. Endorsements do a lot of things for your book. They give you credibility as an author. They influence your readers to purchase not only that book, but future books that you buy. They just feel more confident spending money on something that someone of a position of authority has endorsed. You can use endorsements to promote and market your book. They can be shown within the front or back matter, or even on the back cover of your book. And they can also be added to your website and your social media platforms. Now, in regards to writing your endorsement request letters, these letters can be sent via email or mail as a last resort if you have no other way of contacting these people you want to request the endorsement from, and you have to do it through social media. At least do it through a private message, but that should really be a last resort. Email and mail is just a more professional means of communication. Within your endorsement request, you should include the following: a very brief introduction of who you are and what you do, a very brief summary of your book, an explanation of why you are choosing the person for an endorsement. In other words, what does this person have in common with you or your book? Why are you asking this person for an endorsement? A statement about maybe why you admire the person or how he or she has influenced you, or what you have in common with his or her work. You might also include an image of your book cover. I recommend you also include a small image of you, a small photograph. I think people are more inclined to want to help you if they feel connected to you. And when we see a picture of someone's face, it just helps us to feel more connected. If you have a website, you could also include your website address. If your book has a table of contents, you should include the table of contents. You should always include a complete PDF version of your book. If you're sending an email, it's easy to just attach the PDF in an attachment. And if you're sending the request letter by mail, take the time and energy to print out the entire PDF and mail the whole book along with your request. If other people have already endorsed your book, mention that. And then if you if you mention specific points that you want these people to address, I think they'll be more inclined to write an endorsement for you. People are busy, especially if you're contacting somebody who's, high profile. They're going to be busy and they may feel overwhelmed at the thought of having to write an endorsement. So if you can kind of give them a framework to work with and say something like, I would really love it if you could address these three topics. It just makes it easier for them to sit down and, quickly write it out. And, you know, I feel like they would be more inclined to help you if you mentioned exactly what you want them to say, basically. Um, you should always, always, always personally address each person you approach by his or her name. Obviously, if you're reaching out to 10 different people, you don't want to have to write 10 different request letters, but you should definitely personalize it. Absolutely address every person by his or her name, and kind of tailor the body text a bit by adding what you admire about that person, what you have in common with that person, and so forth. You don't want people to feel like they're reading the same letter that 20 other people are reading, right? And in addition to addressing these people by name, mention their past work, whether it be in publishing or some other field. These people that you're asking for endorsements need to feel special. They need to understand why you're asking them for an endorsement. And so you really need to take the time to just craft those requests mindfully. When I set out to ask for endorsements for my paperback Birdseed, which is about addressing the social emotional domain in the classroom, I strategically sought them from people of authority from within the related fields of education and psychology. And to be honest, I was a little bit nervous about asking for them. I was confident I was confident in my work, confident with my book, but I really wasn't confident that I would hear back from anyone. I was ready to move forward with publication with or without the endorsements, but intuition just told me I have to at least give it a go. So I began by contacting the head of the department for social emotional wellness for the Colorado Department of Education. Turns out she loved the book. She wrote back with my very first professional endorsement, and I was just almost shocked at how easy it was. So then I reached out to some former colleagues and some former school psychologists I had worked with. I asked them to read my book and provide endorsements. Again, they did. It was pretty easy. I think sometimes people are even flattered when you ask them to write an endorsement for you. And then I think one of the last people I asked for an endorsement was Sean Aker. So he is a positive psychology guru that I had followed on social media, and I had read a couple of his books. He wrote The Happiness Advantage and Before Happiness. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And, I think I had built up confidence because I had received endorsements from the other people. I thought, well, why not? I'm just gonna give it a try. So of course, this guy is somewhat famous. I didn't know how to contact him. So I just did a quick Google search for Sean Aker and I browsed through some articles, and eventually I found an email address that looked like it could potentially make its way to him. So I took a chance. I sent the email. I attached my PDF. I explained that I was genuinely a huge fan of him and his work. I summarized my work. I emphasized the similarities between our philosophies. 2 days later, I received an email from someone on his team who said she'd pass on the request. I was floored. I was so happy. And then within a week of sending that first email, I had his endorsement. And it was then and is still one of my proudest moments. Um, these endorsements have strengthened my confidence as a writer, but they've also strengthened my readers' confidence in me, right? Which has really been reflected in my success as a self-published author. And you can bet your patoodle that I mention everywhere I possibly can that my work has been endorsed by a New York Times best-selling author and by the Colorado Department of Education and by psychologists and teachers worldwide. I mention this on my website. I mention this on my professional social media sites, my Amazon author page, and I think I even mentioned it while advertising this course, right? So when you take the time to get endorsements, it's just the benefits are exponential. So I highly recommend taking the time to at least try. And you can always go forth without them, but it's worth the effort to try. They just build trust. And when people know they can trust you, they're going to invest their time and money accordingly. So below here within this lesson, I'm attaching a copy of the actual letter that I wrote to Sean Ager, so that you have an idea of what a request for an endorsement might look like. Reading over it now, several years later, I'm like, I could have written it even better. But at the time, I was happy with it, and ultimately it did the trick. So between the sample letter that I'm sharing with you and the information that I shared above here in this lesson, I think you'll be able to craft a fabulous and an effective endorsement letter of your own. And I really, really, really recommend that you take the time to do it. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you don't get an endorsement and you move forward anyway. It doesn't matter. But so I hope that helps, and I will see you in the next lesson.